Since the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, the success of Ukraine against Russia has been the foremost geopolitical concern of the collective West. Mass quantities of aid have been sent to Ukraine in the form of money, tanks, volunteers, and more. Russia has faced near total expulsion from Western financial institutions, and much faith has been placed in the certainty of Ukraine's victory. But with so much riding on this conflict, we must ask, what if Ukraine loses? Hello audience, Mr. Z here with another video for you. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We have videos like this every week, so be sure to subscribe and stay tuned. Before we go any further, I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone who's donated to us on Patreon, Utreon, and right here on YouTube through channel memberships. Your donations really go a long way to keeping this channel going, and by donating to us across any of these platforms, you'll get access to some great perks including physical merch, a custom designed flag wallpaper, and access to an exclusive members-only Discord server where you can enter your scenarios for a chance to have them made into full videos. You can follow the pop-up on screen here, go to the comments section or description to visit any of these pages and support our channel, and of course you can do so by clicking the join button right below this video. If you can't donate anything, consider subscribing and sharing this video to help the channel out. Now, back to the video. Let's start domestically with Ukraine. In a situation where Ukraine is unable to expel Russian forces, the best case scenario for the Ukrainians would be to retain their diminished borders, losing areas with large ethnically Russian populations. In the aftermath of this, Ukraine would almost certainly join NATO for the sake of securing itself from future invasions, additionally seeing membership in the European Union. A more catastrophic outcome for Ukraine would be a further loss of land up to the Dnieper River, which may include a loss of Kiev. If this were to occur, Ukraine would be forced to move its capital, that is, assuming it remained within the Western sphere. The possibility also exists, albeit slim, that Western Ukraine comes under the authority of a newly established pro-Russian regime. Given the region's pro-Western track record and staunchly anti-Russian sentiments, this outcome is not likely, and what we'd most likely see are the remnants of Ukraine, whatever they might be, ascending to membership in both the EU and NATO. The possibility also exists for Russia to compel a defeated Ukraine by treaty to never join NATO. However, without proper incentive and the great unlikelihood for Russia to realistically invade and occupy the whole of Western Ukraine, such a treaty would be unenforceable. In Europe, there would not be the same disillusion and fatigue which America experienced following the withdrawal from Afghanistan, but panic. Europe had collectively poured much into Ukraine, and yet it was not enough, and now that threat that they were hoping to defeat was standing right at their doorstep. Even more concerning was that not only their support, but the support of America was insufficient to stop Russia, and with the Europeans realizing that, so too would there be an acknowledgement that present European military capabilities were insufficient. This alarm would almost certainly drive the European Union to increase its military capabilities independent of the NATO umbrella, with countries like Poland, Ukraine, and France leading the charge for European militarization. Germany and the Benelux countries in the meantime would explore avenues for increasing Europe's economic and energy self-sufficiency, no longer being able to rely upon Russia's anti-Russian sentiment soars across Europe, while simultaneously confidence in American support plummets. The Europeans would have a much greater sense of urgency given their proximity to Russia, and while relations with the US would strengthen as a means of having all the support they could get, Europe would be preparing for a future in which it alone must defend and supply itself. This could also lead to further calls for European interoperability and integration for the sake of quicker and more decisive policy decisions. Russia in the immediate aftermath of the war likely would not seek additional expansions unless provoked or placed in a precarious position, say if Kaliningrad were invaded or threatened. As shown by the large gap between the invasion of Crimea and the launch of the special military operation, Russia moved slowly and strategically. Almost certainly the Russians would focus on shoring up control over their recently captured lands, begin reconstruction of damaged areas, and replenish lost war materiel before conducting any further direct actions, though passively Russia may also support proxies or allies such as Syria for the sake of exploiting Western fatigue and drawing attention away from itself. Putin's leadership would be legitimized by this victory not only in Russia but across several fence-sitter countries who might now begin to see Russia as a viable alternative to American or European leadership, strengthening Russia's geopolitical position most likely across Asia, Africa, and perhaps even in parts of Latin America. The United States would suffer significantly on both the world stage and domestically. The reputation of American leadership would be damaged, with the American public both blaming the incumbent Democratic government for the failure and bemoaning the money lost fighting the war. Assuming the war ends prior to the presidential election, this might be sufficient to bring about a Republican victory, which would in turn drive the United States to further withdraw itself from global affairs. Regardless of whichever party wins the presidential election, Russia's victory would almost certainly embolden China to pursue its own invasion and annexation of Taiwan. With the Europeans fixated on preparing their defenses against Russia and the United States diminished in its internal confidence and possibly withdrawn, Taiwan would be particularly vulnerable to an assault by China at this point in time. Assuming the United States hasn't withdrawn from global affairs in response to China's actions, they would likely be going at it alone. Europe has already expressed increased skepticism toward American antagonization of China and recognizes that Chinese affairs in the Pacific have little direct impact upon themselves. With the continent on high alert following a Russian victory, the chances of Europe throwing its support behind the United States to defend Taiwan are slim. Though that said, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom may lend their support, along with Japan and South Korea. But ultimately, even American support for this effort would be half-hearted, as a majority of Americans would simply feel much too disillusioned by the loss in Ukraine to support another war, especially one erupting so soon after. The United States would concede, the ruling government recognizing the potential risks would not be worth a rising investment, and ultimately Taiwan would fall to China. In a geopolitical 1-2 punch by Russia and China, the global authority and hegemony of the United States would be shattered, its alliances would be brought into question, and its population would be demoralized, virtually assuring that the United States would further recede from global politics, allowing Russian and Chinese influence to grow in the years following, though certainly not without challenge by the Europeans and possibly the Indians. Incredibly, the fall of one single piece could have this massive cascading effect which, ironically because of the initial Western investment, would have such a hefty toll upon the stability of the Western-led global order, and if framed in this context makes clear a possible reason why the United States government only seems to intensify its support for Ukraine even when at times circumstances appear to be going poorly for the Ukrainians. Do remember that this is purely a hypothetical, however it does allow us to consider that there certainly is a possibility that if Ukraine were to lose its war with Russia, because of how much the West has invested in this front and how much confidence has been placed in Ukraine's ability to win, a defeat would be catastrophic for Western morale as well as significantly shift geopolitical dynamics enough for all the moving parts at this very moment to click into place and cause a chain reaction, which would not only see a chunk of Ukraine annexed by Russia, but see Europe become much more cohesively united, more militaristic and more autarkic, while also becoming less confident in the promise of American security, though definitely still maintaining its alliance with the US so long as it does not compromise its own interests. Those interests may be compromised if the United States attempts to pressure Europe into supporting action against China for its likely invasion of Taiwan. The Europeans might not even concede to impose financial penalties upon China, let alone pressure military action on behalf of Taiwan, given how significant China's economy is to the global market. So abruptly cutting Russia off was a decision European economists have since come to question, and no doubt there would be even greater skepticism about doing the same with China on behalf of the US. Thus, Ukraine is divided, Europe grows more distant, China is emboldened, Taiwan is possibly annexed, the US suffers a massive blow to its global standing, with domestic politics likely to reflect an utter disdain for military failures seen in Afghanistan, Ukraine, and Taiwan, all in the span of a few years. But what do you think? What might happen if Ukraine loses? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The US of Z thanks you for watching. Mr. Z, out.